So, Alison Carr, thank you so much for agreeing to come and speak to us. I guess as we have recently done it, let's start off with talking a little bit about last quiz night and our collaboration on that. I don't really want to steer you too much with questions. I'm kind of, happy to let you chat and then stick in some observations and thoughts as you go. So do you want to just have a bit of a talk about how we got started with that and how you found it? And
yeah, I mean, we were just saying before everyone came in, I was looking back at my emails in preparation for now, and I realised that not even the first email, but the first email that I recorded getting from Hannah about quiz night was in 2017. So that just gives you some idea of how long that process took. And there was a couple of things that slowed it down a little bit or pushed it back a little bit, but not by a huge amount, maybe by, I don't know, 6 months or something, not by years. So it is quite a long process, or it can be quite a long process. It came about because Hannah got in touch with me and asked me if I would be interested in writing their sort of follow-up play. I might not be pitching that right, for their Box of Tricks' touring show to non-theatre spaces. So they'd done Chip Shop Chips, which I hadn't seen because the performance I was due to see got snowed off. It was the one performance that got snowed off. So I never saw it, but Hannah sent me the script, and I was aware of it and I sort of knew what it was. And yeah, would I write the sort of next one? The company had learned a lot of stuff, I think, from doing that tour and wanted to do it again. It had been successful and audiences had really engaged with it.
Yes, for anyone who didn't see last quiz night, or indeed Chip Shop Chips, to give a little bit of background on that rather than making you do the work, Alison. Box of Tricks have kind of got various models of producing, but our general rule of thumb is that we will produce plays in the way that the story is calling out to be shown and presented. And Chip Shop Chips by Becky Presswich very much felt like it needed to not be in a theatre. It needed to be in chip shops and community spaces, because it was about people coming together within community spaces and the relationship that people have with place, and also how personal relationships play out in public spaces. And we took that on what we called a kind of hybrid tour. So it meant it went to some theatre spaces, but an awful lot of non-theatre spaces, including chip shops and libraries and village halls and various other exciting places. And we loved it, and the audiences loved it. So we decided to keep that as a model of producing. And we sort of, broadly speaking, call it our non-theatre space show, although we did take last quiz night to a theatre.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
And we would have gone to more had we not had to cut the tour short due to global pandemic. But it's very much about creating a piece of work that can work in the heart of communities, and that engages the audience in a different, deeper way to a kind of standard fourth wall play. And I know that was one of the challenges that we talked about quite a lot as you were writing the script.
Yeah, I mean, I'd never written a play like that before. I'd never had that sort of brief before. I'd only ever written plays for theatre spaces, and that idea of it being a bit sort of involving the audience in some way, and how you made that work. Also, well, Becky had basically used every possible trope you could use. She'd had a quiz, she'd had a raffle, she'd had bingo, she'd had the making things, the audience making stuff, she'd had food. She had ticked every single box. And I was just left thinking, there's nothing left. There's nothing that Becky didn't cover in Chip Shop Chips. So what am I supposed to do? So my solution to that was that I tried to drop out of the project. I basically had a complete meltdown and just freaked myself out, got myself so wrapped up in knots that I couldn't do it, that there was nothing left, that I emailed Hannah and just said, look, I'm not the person for this. I cannot do this. Fortunately, they talked me down off the ledge and were like, it's fine, you can just calm down and just take a breath. And that was one of the reasons why I got a little bit pushback. So once I sort of said, okay, right, I will do it, I'd sort of backed myself into a corner then, because I couldn't drop out again, because that would be like the boy that cries wolf. So I was kind of in it, and I just kind of had to get on with it. And that sounds quite mercenary, but I had made a commitment, and I had a deadline. And I remember sitting at my desk, and I hadn't written anything. I think I'd sent you like a really inappropriately dark, really depressing sort of first scene of an idea that had about 7 characters in it, when the brief was like no more than 4, and it can't be that. So things were not on the greatest track. So yeah, I was sitting at my desk, and I really had to just almost shut my eyes and just be like, think of something, just think of something. And I kept going back to a quiz night. I kept going back to a quiz. An audience love a quiz. I didn't want it to be about a quiz team, because that's been done in all different sort of ways. So the audience are playing the quiz. Okay, the audience are playing the quiz. They're playing it for real. What does that do? How does that work? And it was almost a case of a quiz night, and what can I bring to that is intrinsically something that interests me, and that is sort of my style and my voice. So I was a quiz night at the end of the world. Okay, that's interesting. What does that mean? What does that do? And I had that title, the last quiz night at the end of the world. It got shortened to the last quiz night on Earth, but originally it was the last quiz night at the end of the world. And I just thought, that's such a great title. That needs to be on a poster. Like, that needs to be, that's something. There's something in that, and it grew out from there, really. And once I had that, it was quite quick. I think I wrote a first draft, and
it was a very strong first draft, actually.
Yeah, it was too short, but there was a lot. It was on the right road.
Yeah, we didn't change very much. We just expanded it.
Yeah, the second draft, again, it all kind of came quite easily after that. I think that the running had been such a trauma and a trial that once I got there, I was like, okay. And the second draft was what we took into R&D.
Yeah.
And that was pretty strong. We spent a good sort of 4 days working on that. And there was no great excavations to be done. It was kind of tweaking it and tightening it up and shortening it. I love to cut things out, so cutting stuff out. And then we took a draft into rehearsal. So once I kind of started rolling down the hill, it was all right.
And did you feel, because it's quite unusual for Box of Tricks to give playwrights as specific a brief as we do with the non-theatre space shows, and actually the only really specific thing about that is that we want the shows to work in community spaces. We want the experience for the audiences to be more immersive, more interactive than a quote traditional play, and we are a bit prescriptive about size of cast in terms of the spaces that we're playing and how we tour. But did you find, because we don't normally give briefs to writers, did you find that actually having that specific of a brief created some of those problems for your process and created some roadblocks for you? Was it that, or was it just that interactive stuff felt like a really scary word?
Yeah, I think it was that. I think I've had briefs before where you can only write for a certain number of actors, or whatever. I've done that before. That wasn't a problem. It was the immersive. I think I just didn't understand what that meant, and it almost took over from any sort of I'm just going to write a good play, and that's all you're doing. Ultimately, that's all you're trying to do, is to write a good play with good characters, good story, good structure, all of that. I couldn't see through the word immersive to know what that meant. But then ultimately, I ended up writing a play, and it had a quiz in it, which meant that the audience were joining in. And there were things in that were brand new, you know, discovered that an audience really, really love a quiz.
Oh, goodness me, they do.
They really will get involved. If you want the audience to join in, give them a quiz. And even things like the placement of information had to change a little bit, because you can't have a big reveal after an answers round, for example, because no one's listening. They're only interested in how many points they got. And part of my sort of ego, you know, the nights that I saw it a few times before it had to finish early, and you know, part of me sat there like, I spent months crafting this. You're not listening to my dialogue. It's really good. But at the same time, you've done what you set out to do, because they're having a really good time. And you know, ultimately they didn't miss anything, you know, that they couldn't catch up on, and the actors did a great job in sort of learning to ride the wave of the audience. But that's something that I've never had to experience. You know, usually I've been an audience have been sat nice and quiet in a
reverential silence.
Yeah, or I used to get upset if they, like, you know, had a crisp, and now I'm like, that is the least of my troubles. If they're shouting out, they're joining in, they've got a lot to say, but it's great, because that's what it was for. And I came to really enjoy that, and that was a sign that we'd set out to achieve what we wanted to achieve, because they were loving the quiz, you know, they were really invested in it, and they were loving don't get me wrong, they were enjoying the play as well. And you know, the quiz was an integral part of the play, and it wasn't just sort of tacked on the top, it was part of the story, and it ultimately at the end came to have a bigger meaning. And you know, I think the audiences, certainly the ones I was in, you know, rode that journey with us really nicely.
Yeah, I mean, these projects, both Chip Shop Chips and Last Quiz Night, for us at Box of Tricks, very much illuminate your thinking about a relationship between an audience and a play anyway. I think that
definitely,
as theatre makers, we can all get a little bit precious about the way that a play should be experienced and the way it should be responded to. And, you know, like I remember back in the first run of Narvik, when it was in the Liverpool Playhouse studio, like someone was sat in the front row eating grapes, and I was like, how dare they bring a snack into my play? This is a high theatre, high art. And actually, it's like, get over yourself, Hannah. Like, they were hungry. They can eat and enjoy stuff and pay attention. And actually, the joy of going into people's village halls, it's their space. Like the show that we saw together up in Northumberland, when they were all sitting there tucking into their pie and chips, and you know, we were the ones who'd been welcomed into that space. They owned it. It was their territory, and yet they still had a great time and really embraced it. Your mum and dad won the quiz.
They did, and just to be clear, they did not have any insider information. I did not tell them the answers. My mum specifically would not let me tell her the answers. She is a quiz fiend, so yeah, they did not get any help from me. I was trying to win the quiz, and even I who wrote the quiz could not win the quiz. I mean, my God. I mean, I did a production in Edinburgh a few years, 5 years ago now, and somebody ate a whole packed lunch during it. And I just watched them eating their packed lunch. I was absolutely fascinated by it. And, you know, they were in Edinburgh. They probably didn't have any time to go and have something to eat. But you're right. It does change your relationship, I think, with an audience, and why you're there.
Yeah.
You know, the point is to give people a great night or a great afternoon and to entertain them. And, you know, one of my sort of little drums that I bang is that I sometimes think that entertainment falls down the list of things that plays are required to do and required to be. You know, yes, there can be all of these things, but also entertaining. People are spending their money to come and have fun. And there's room for all different kinds of plays with all different kinds of outcomes for an audience. But I think fun and entertainment has got to be up on that list, especially at the minute, especially coming out of the back of this. I mean, you know, who doesn't want to come and see a play about the end of the world? I mean, it was just so timely. The fact that it got cancelled because the world started to end.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Someone's got a sense of humour.
Yeah.
Oh, no, someone up there. Fab. Well, I guess I was trying to think. I was hoping I'd have a nice segue. Oh, that leads me on to my next point I was going to ask you about.
Totally change the subject. It's
yeah, totally changing the subject, but still talking about you as a writer. I mean, I guess talking about lockdown and pandemic times, and I don't, when we talked last week, we said we didn't want to have a particularly lengthy chat about how have you got through lockdown and been creative and productive, because actually that's a fallacy in itself, feeling like you've got to achieve anything other than surviving extraordinary times and keeping yourself well and sane. But we were talking about the Northeast Playwrights Group that you've helped set up and are playing a part in. So I kind of wanted to hear a bit about that. I don't know, I think we've got some writers here who are definitely based in the Northeast, so I know they will probably be interested in hearing about what's available in the region to support them, but also talking about a bit about regional identity as a writer and actually identity generally as a writer. What parts of you you feel define who you are as a writer, your voice, how you present yourself, what you're representing, if anything, other than yourself.
The Northeast Playwriting Group, there's a lot to cover in there. Who are you? What are you? And why? The Northeast Playwriting Group, if there are any writers in here that are from the Northeast, it's a new initiative that was set up by Zoe Cooper, Laura Lindau, Jez Casey. I think that might be all. There might be, I'm sorry, I might be missing someone up. I'm not part of the initial group that sort of brainchild it was. But a group to support Northeast writers and to just give us a community, a sense of community, because we don't really have that in the Northeast. We're sort of quite disparate. And also we tend to belong, or not belong, but we tend to be associated with different theatres, and there's not necessarily a lot of sort of crossing of the streams. There is some, it's not impossible, but it can be a little bit, well, this person is a live theatre writer, or this person is a Northern Stage writer, or whatever that might be. So it's trying to just bring us together, and also try and bridge some sort of gap. There seems to be fair few opportunities for new writers out there, and then sort of support to get to your first full length main stage production. But then there's quite a gap. Where do you go from there? How do you get your second main stage production? Not necessarily in the Northeast, just full stop. Yeah. So there seems to be a bit of a gap between the new writers and then the ever going, never ending path of emerging, whatever that is. Yeah. To kind of move on to the next stage. I don't have the email address on the top of my head, but if anybody wants to get involved with the Northeast group, you're from the Northeast, you can email me. I'll put my email address in the chat, and then I can send you the email address once I've got it. I don't want to give you one that's wrong and have you emailing some poor person and who's like, what?
Are they on Twitter or anything like that?
No, they're not. Not yet. It's very early days. We've only had maybe 2 or 3 meetings, so if you're not part of it yet, you haven't missed out on months and months and months of sort of groundwork. It's just starting up and just trying to find out what it is and why it is and what people might want to get out of it. It's very user-led. There is no kind of these people are in charge and then everyone else does what they say. It's not like that at all. Yeah. In terms of sort of northernness,
actually I'd be interested to, you say that it feels a bit disparate in the Northeast anyway, in this sense of being associated with one theatre and I guess a loyalty, fealty to theatres. Does that feel that's interesting, isn't it? And is it because, to me, there's a lot of crossover between the work that is on in those theatres, but I think it's the same nationwide. I remember when Box Trick started out and we were in London, that companies and artists felt like they were a Bush company, or you were a Royal Court writer, or you were, you sat best at the Finborough. And it's interesting why that comes about and how, whether that's by accident or choice. I mean, I know that you've had a strong relationship with Live historically, and did you feel like that was a choice on your part, or actually just that an opportunity was there and then you got settled into that groove?
I think an opportunity was there, and I that's where I sort of the path that I took. I mean, my relationship with live has been maybe 10 years in the making before I got a full length play on there. I actually started at live as in I wrote them a letter, because that's how far back we're talking, and a pigeon sent it, and then I just graduated from uni, and I sent them a letter saying, look, do you need anyone to do anything? You know, I'm interested in theatre and I don't know what I want to do. I think I want to be a director. Do you need any persons to do anything directly? And they replied, and I was a Jeremy Herron's, I'm not going to say assistant, that is too grandiose of a term. I was sort of tea getter, and I bought a lot of Boost bars. That's my main memory of that. On a production that Jeremy Herron was doing at Live, because he was the literary manager at the time. So that's how I started at Live, as kind of a director, kind of dog's body. And they would do scratch nights. Oh God, what was it called? You would do like a little 5-minute extract of something, and then a gong would go off and you get cut off like mid-word. And then the audience would vote on their favourite. They used to do them. So I did a couple of them, went to writers groups, just really kind of, climb my way up very slowly over a lot of years until eventually I kind of got a full length main stage show. It was a long journey. But I think because I kind of started on that path with Live, I never really explored too much with Northern Stage. Or other theatres, there were a lot of theatres in the region, it's not just those two. So, I've done work with Northern Stage. I've worked with them before, but that not sort of pursued that path as hard as I did with Live. So just going back to what you were saying about, I guess, kind of northernness. I am northern. I was born in the northeast. I still live in the northeast. I guess it's not like a quote that I put on and off. It just is who I am. So it's going to come out in my work unconsciously. It just does. I think there's maybe a sort of there's a rhythm to northern speech. To the dialogue that I write. And I never specify where my plays are set, so I won't name a town or something. It'll just say a seaside town, a pub, a house. I don't say where, but a lot of times actors will say to me, this character sounds northern. Yeah. I'm going to do this in a northern accent, which I carefully vet for terrible northern accents that I will not allow.
Generic northern.
Generic northern, yeah, it's a big bugbear of mine. Yeah. But I think that just because we're from the north, it doesn't mean that we can only tell stories to each other. We can tell stories across the country, and I think those stories need to be heard, and those voices need to be heard, not just in the region that we're from. There's no reason not to, and there's no reason just to tell stories about northernness. Yes, there's a place for those stories, of course there is, but there's also a place for stories that aren't about that. I did a Radio 4 play a few years ago, and I was insistent that the two main characters were from the northeast, and that they were Geordie actors, and that they played the two main characters. The play had nothing to do with being from the north. It was about a Dolly Parton impersonator, and there's no reason why Radio 4 cannot have two Geordie accents telling you a play about being a Dolly Parton impersonator. It doesn't have to be about coal mining, and it doesn't have to be about shipyards. Yeah. It can be about life. It can be about other things, modern things, timeless things. So that is another little drum that I bang. I try and get northern voices on different stages in the country. I did a play a few years ago, a sort of work in progress at 503 in London. This play about some women who get trapped in their attic because the house is flooding, and you know, the audience enjoyed it. And then one of the actors heard two ladies in the toilet saying, "I liked it, but why were they from Newcastle? Why not?" why did people in Newcastle's houses not flood? Do they not have, you know, these stories to tell? So I think that's important, to get these voices out there and challenge those stereotypes. And, you know, the RSC casts, you know, northern characters or actors with northern accents as sort of the stupid roles. Let's just try and, you know, do what we can to move away from that. So that, you know, that is something that I'm on a personal mission, one play at a time.
It's really interesting because we had, when we did Sparkplug, David Judge's play, which is, you know, I mean, he performed it himself, and he's, you know, Mancunian to the bones of, you know, his being, and has a proper Manc accent, and did it in his own accent. And we got a lot of feedback from people saying it is wonderful hearing that voice on stage. That's the, you know, those are the voices I grew up with, and I don't get to hear them unless they're in, you know, Shameless, or, you know, a drug dealer in a detective drama or something like that. Actually, to just hear a story in the voices of my, you know, my world is really powerful. And I think it links back to that sense of us being a bit precious about the experience of theatre, and who's got the right to be on stage and who's got the right to be telling those stories. And they all link in with each other. And actually, I kind of hope that this period of enforced reflection that we've all had from sitting at home will result in some breaking down of those barriers, and actually questioning that sense of who has the right to tell stories, who's got the right to make the stories, and actually going, everybody, if you want to do it, you can. And I have lots of conversations with playwrights where they worry about writing too close to themselves and their own experience, or too far away from it. And it's that sense of, oh, well, if I've lived it, then I can tell that story because I've got a right to tell it. But also, oh, is it too close to my own experience? And then if they haven't lived it at all, they go, but what, have I got the right to tell that story about, you know, refugees, because I've never been a refugee? And you think, but, you know, you're all people and you've all lived in society, and, you know, you can do research for the facts. And I don't feel like that's something that you ever question in your identity as a writer, really, that you view yourself as a storyteller and you take it upon yourself to be responsible in your storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, I've never tried to write a play about being a refugee, or, you know, anything kind of that far out of my own experience. And I think there, you know, obviously there's a huge responsibility if you decide to take something like that on. And I think you need to question, why am I writing this story? And also, am I the person to tell this story? You know, or there may be other voices and other experiences that can tell this story better. And that's, you know, like I say, that's not something that I've ever tried or ever particularly been drawn to, you know, as yet. But yeah, I think, you know, I think I do have a distinctive voice as a writer. You know, people tell me that I have a distinctive voice as a writer. Somebody read a play of mine recently and they said it was the most Alison Carr play they'd ever read. And I was like, well, I'm glad that I wrote it, because that would be really awkward if I hadn't. You know, and it took me a while to find that voice. And, you know, early on in my career, I was trying to write like other people that I was a fan of. You know, I was trying to write like Victoria Wood, because I love her. You may see the 2 Soup sign behind me. I love her with all my heart. You know, I was trying to write like Alan Bennett, because I'd seen all the Talking Heads monologues, the original ones, because I studied them at school. You know, I was trying to be what I thought a writer was, or what the writers I'd seen were. And it wasn't until I had absolutely no chance, I thought, of getting a play on, that I wrote a play that I wanted to write that was entirely me. It was quintessential. Well, it became quintessential me, because you can't have quintessential you when it's the first thing. But it was a play about 2 women who got trapped in a cupboard at a Rocky Horror convention. Now, I'm a huge fan of Rocky Horror. I was since I was like 14. I was obsessed with it. And it, you know, it was just stupid. It was totally totally stupid. There was a Greek chorus of Patricia Quinn's. It was jokes that made me laugh, that was just stupid. I mean, I was a big fan of things like The Mighty Boosh, like that sort of surreal, weird, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you know, all of that sort of stuff. But I'd never thought that that was for me, or that that was something that people would like, or that would lean into, or would come with me on that sort of road. So I wrote it after I graduated, when I was just kicking about being a temp. And I never thought it would see the light of day. So I just wrote it entirely for myself, for my own entertainment and my own, just to have something to do, something creative to do. And I sent it off to a production company that were looking for plays for the Edinburgh Fringe that were half an hour long. It was on the back of the stage, the newspaper of the stage back in the day. I'm so old, my God. And I got a phone call from them saying, we want to do it as part of their season at the Fringe. And I was absolutely like gobsmacked. I could not believe it. I was like, really? You sure? Compounded by the fact that it was performed in a lift. So it wasn't a lift in a building, it was like a standalone lift in the Pleasance courtyard. So it was like as big as a lift you would expect a lift to be. The doors closed as well. So there was 5 actors and the audience standing in a lift. And they had to do the time warp, obviously. So yeah, it was totally crazy, but it really showed me that actually my voice was, the oddness of that, the weirdness of that, the jokes that made me laugh did make other people laugh. Yeah. And actually that, you know, it was unlike any other play that was on in the lift, and we got good reviews and really good audiences. And that was a real vindication and validation that they, you know, lean into your voice, lean into what it is that you want to do, because no one else is going to be doing it like you're going to be doing it. And it just gave me a real confidence boost, and I kind of, you know, went from there really. And those sort of odd ideas.
Held on to that mentality, though, haven't you?
Yeah. I think so, because I tend to write plays that have an oddness to them. A family that replaced their child who's left for university with a stuffed monkey. 2 sisters who get bequeathed their mother's eyeballs. I mean, that was what Iris was about. That was the play that I had on at Live. That's quite a high concept, weird thing to ask an audience to come with you. You know, we're going to pull out a jar at the end of Act 1 and it's going to have a floating eyeball in it. You know, happy Thursday. But that's what I'm interested in. That is how I'm interested in telling stories. I don't sit down and think, right, what's the weirdest thing I can possibly do? Right, let's do that. You know, the ideas just kind of come to me in that way. I watch a lot of true crime documentaries. I watch a lot of documentaries about like weird stuff, and often it'll manifest itself, and I'll think, oh, that's I might tell a story. That'd be an interesting way to tell a story, or that might be an interesting thing to do. When I did find myself sort of actively sitting down and thinking, right, what's the weird thing in this now? What's the gimmick? That's when I stopped. Because it felt like it was becoming gimmicky, and I was running out of organic ideas. So I moved away from it. You know, I wrote a play without a weird thing in it, to see if I could, and I could. And sometimes I'll go back to it if something strikes me, or I read about something, or I see something. I'll think, oh yeah, no, that's really interesting. I'm gonna keep a hold of that. But I have the confidence now to know that I can tell other stories as well, and I don't necessarily need that hook to tell them. But I think that just comes with time and experience, and just getting more confident in how you tell a story.
And I mean, you've had over your, you know, the 10 plus years of your, you know, writing career, had quite a breadth of experience in terms of different types of work, with, you know, shows for the Fringe, shows for studio spaces, shows for bigger spaces, but also doing a play for National Theatre Connections and doing your Dolly Parton radio play, you know. And what can you talk a bit about those the difference of experience, particularly with stuff like connections and writing for radio, that actually I think unless playwrights have done that, can feel a bit like a total unknown and a bit of a fortress that you could never get into. And actually when the conversations we've had about those projects have been really positive, they've been really positive experiences.
Yeah, I think both of those, radio and the national connections, can feel like really, really closed shops, because they are. Ultimately, that's why they do feel like that. And my route into both of them was very long and winding, a bit of a theme that you might notice coming out of this. I never do anything quickly or in a straight line.
Yeah.
So, I mean, getting into, you know, my Radio 4 play, I responded to an open call out. For a lot of the stuff that I've done has been from submitting things to things. You know, I strongly advise any writers out there to just enter stuff, you know, throw stuff in, because no one's going to come knocking on your door and ask you to write something. You know, you have to put it out there yourself. So I responded to like a call out from New Writing North, which is a organisation based up here, but like short 10-minute little plays that could be recorded for the radio, as part of the Free Thinking Festival, which is a festival that happens up here at the Sage every 2 years, I'm not sure. So I entered that, and they chose it as one of them, and I went and recorded it for a day, and I met a Radio 4 producer through that who was recording the play. And then she introduced me to another Radio 4 producer who was, because she went, thing is, with my radio career, every producer that I meet then goes on maternity leave. So this is why it's been such a long road. So she went on maternity leave, and then I got passed over to another one, and they don't do it anymore, but back then they used to do a thing called Sparks, which was a radio writing residency. So you got sent for a week to a farmhouse. I can't remember where it was. I know we got 2 trains and a taxi. You got sent off to this farmhouse, and you were sort of taught the ways of radio. It was for writers who had not written for radio but had been sort of identified as maybe being interested in writing for radio. And you were nominated by a producer. So this producer had nominated me for it. I went, I had probably one of the worst weeks of my life. Absolutely hated every single second of it. It was awful. We had to pitch and like write. I am terrible at pitching. I cannot describe my ideas. We had to pitch to the head of Radio 4
in this farmhouse.
In a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere with like cows outside. And then he would basically tell us like how dreadful we were. And then we came home. So because I was so furious about the week that I'd had, because I hated it so much, and I thought that they all thought I was like just useless, it made me determined to get a play on Radio 4. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, you know, you need that little bit of fire in you, I think, to pursue something. So she went on maternity leave, and then I got passed over to a different producer, and with him I developed a pitch for the play that became Dollywood, about a Dolly Parton impersonator. That play had been kicking around in my life for years. I'd been trying to get it as a stage play, and I couldn't make it work. And then obviously with radio, you know, you can tell, you can go to Dollywood, you can go to Tennessee on the radio very easily. You can have someone who you're telling an audience is the absolute spitting double of Dolly Parton on the radio. And he really helped. You know, it was a long road writing. A pitch is hard to write, and you know the producer is there to help you. And it's a lot of redrafting. You really have to know your story, know your idea, but go into quite a lot of detail. The producer pitches it on your behalf, so that whole thing at the farmhouse where we had to pitch ourselves was never going to happen in real life.
It's doubly mean.
Oh, I know, it was madness. And then it got commissioned, and then I had a year to write it. So you get very clear deadlines. I mean, I'm talking a few years ago now, so things might be different now. But when I did it, you got very, very clear deadlines for the year, and you hit your deadlines. My pitch became very different to the play that I actually wrote. The pitch really just is to get you through the door. And then, you know, there is wiggle room in there. There's freedom if something isn't working, or, you know, you want to change it. So yeah, it was a really enjoyable experience. Ultimately, I really enjoyed writing for radio. Unfortunately, he then left. I don't think his wife had a baby. He moved to Radio Wales. So often you will have a relationship with a producer, and that relationship will continue throughout your sort of radio career. Mine stopped then because he went to Radio Wales, where the priority is obviously for Welsh writers. So I haven't had a radio producer since then, and it is hard to get one. But, you know, try. Listen to radio plays, listen to ones you like, and at the end it'll tell you who the producer is, and you can contact them through, you know, first name, surname at BBC, whatever it is. You know, it's easy to get in touch with them. I wouldn't get in touch with them until you have a strong idea, you know, maybe a page of a pitch of it, you know, something that you can actually send them pretty quickly. I wouldn't just go in sort of, I'd like to write for radio.
Help me, please. Yeah.
In terms of NT Connections, that was more recent. So I got invited to do an attachment at the National in 2018. I'd had a play on with Royal Welsh and Payne's Plough, and I'd sent the National the script, and they'd read it, and they'd been aware of me for a while, but we'd never met, we'd never sort of had any sort of contact. So I got invited down for a chat, went for a chat, and then they invited me to come in attachment. So it's invitation only, with the National Theatre Studio, but they do exist. And, you know, if you've got an agent, or if you're, you know, in a position to invite the National to come and see stuff, obviously on the other side of this, then, you know, it is worth it. It's 6 weeks, but you can take that over as long as you need. If you've got, you know, other commitments, if you don't live in London, you don't have to take a 6-week block. You can do it. I did it over about 3 months. And while I was there, I knew I wanted to write a connections play. I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't really know what it was or how you did it, but I just had decided that I wanted to write one. So I just asked to speak to whoever was in charge of that, and it's a guy called Ola. We had a chat. He asked me to send him something. I sent him a script. He read it, and he said, and he came up to my little office and said, you know, yeah, we'd like you to do one. It was very, very straightforward, because I was there. I was in the building, and it wasn't having to do emails or, you know, back and forward. So I was in a privileged position in that regard.
Yeah. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know about NT Connection, Alison and I are both very familiar with the programme ourselves. It's the National's youth theatre kind of festival, isn't it? They commission 12 writers. Is it 12?
12 or 10, I think, yeah.
10 or 12 writers to write a play that's around about an hour,
yeah, for
young people. And then those plays are available to schools and youth theatres throughout the United Kingdom. And you pay to get the rights for the play to do, and then you put it on in your school or theatre or whatever. And then you also there's like regional showcases. So there's ones in like Belfast and Wolverhampton and Manchester and wherever, and you go to your regional one, and then so there might be, over the course of 3 nights, several productions of a play. And then the most representative, I hesitate to say the best, the most representative of the glory of youth theatre in these British Isles are invited down for a festival at the National, and they get to perform their shows on the National Theatre stages, and then do the great and the good of the industry come along and present them with kind of prizes and stuff at the end. And just these kids get to come and have the most amazing time being in the National Theatre. But it's a really great showcase for writers, and because there are so many plays every cycle, a lot of writers, you know, can produce plays for them. And it's how was it writing a play for young people? I mean, I know that your experience of Connections has been again, disrupted by global pandemic.
Honestly, it's so inconvenient. Just to clarify that the connections isn't invitation only, so you know you can throw your hat in the you can throw your hat in the ring for that. Anyone can. It was really good. It was really good fun. I've never written a play for young people, and kind of in the opposite way to, I guess, quiz night. Or maybe I learned my lesson, but you know, I they say, you know, from a cast of like 5 to 30, really broad parameters, about anything you want, for an age group of like 11 to 17 or something like that. So that's big. You know, you very rarely as a writer, especially now, get to write for big casts, because no one is putting on big cast plays because they can't afford it. So I'd never written a play for a big cast. I think the biggest was like 5. And I could have written a play for 5 young people, you know, that would have been allowed, but I didn't want to do that. I want to really challenge myself and see if I could write a big cast play. And instead of like totally freaking out like I did with Last Quiz Night, I just kind of like ran at it sort of head first and really enjoyed it. It was a real chance to just have a try. Let's just see what happens. I wrote a play about parallel worlds. Not something I've ever explored before, but I was like, why not? And also you can have double people, because a double might come down from a parallel world, and I was like, well, that's 2 cast members straight out the gate. And I could have a big sort of chorus of young people, so if, you know, people wanted a couple of lines, then they could join in like that. It didn't all have to be, you know, 5 of the school's best and brightest young performers. It would give a lot of people a chance to be involved, but there was a flexibility. So you could perform it with 9 people if you wanted to, or you could perform it with 50 people. I kept it as broad as I could in terms of having a big chorus. That is not an idea that I originated. A lot of National Connections plays have that sort of chorus element. But yeah, just went for it, and you know, all out, why not? What have you got to lose? Again, kind of the opposite approach that I took to quiz night, but hopefully that was a learning experience. Yeah.
Well, we've we've been chatting for ages.
I know, I'm sorry. Once I get on something, I'm like, no.
No, it's lovely. I mean, let's open it to the floor. Has anyone got any questions, as specific, vague, all-encompassing as you want? Alison is at your disposal, so if there's anything, give us a wave, or
redrafting, process, or anything you like.
Anything at all.
Or not. I'm so uninspiring. Nobody wants to ask me a question. That's fine.
I've taken myself off mute. Unfortunately, my camera's broken, but I do have a question about radio plays.
Okay.
Thanks, Emma.
I'm writing a radio play at the moment. Show, don't tell. What about radio plays? Like, what's the crap?
Show, don't tell. Oh, it's like the killer, isn't it? Yeah.
Too dialogue heavy, and obviously, yeah.
Yeah, there was some phrase that they used to trot out at that farmhouse. It was like, tell with your ears. It was something awful like that. You wonder why I hated it. I think, yeah, show don't tell does really mess with your mind when you're doing a radio play. I'm trying to think how I approached it. I think actually radio, it sounds like a contradiction, but radio can be very visual, but the audience are making those pictures themselves. So it's about trying not to go down the road of, oh, is that a door you're opening? That looks like a mysterious small door that you have decided to go through. And find ways through your dialogue to kind of tell the audience what it is they need to know. I'm really describing this really, really badly.
It's a shame, because, you know, if it's like a love story or whatever, you can just show like one scene of someone looking longingly into their eyes, but you don't want to drag it out. You don't want to drag a story out, because you can make it really long just by telling everything.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, characters can be doing something that can while they're doing it, you know, a thing that can tell you, you know, how they're feeling about another character, or they're talking to somebody else. I really resisted having a like narrator voice in Dollywood, because I thought it was a cop out, until I wrote in a narrator voice and I realized it was actually brilliant. I mean, do you have a narrator voice? Or
No, but that's a good idea.
Narrator voices help you so much, because they can solve a lot of that problem. They can tell you what a character is thinking. They don't always have to be telling the truth, but they can tell you how a character is feeling in that moment, and that is helpful. Do you want to pop your, if you don't, I'll tell you what.
I really want to, you know, pretend to make eye contact, but unfortunately my camera's decided to fail.
No, it's fine. I was going to say, I'll pop my email address in the chat, and I will have a better think, and I'll let you know. Is that all right?
Of course, yeah.
I just feel like I'm having a bit of a blank right now, but I know I can give you better advice than the dross that I just trotted out. So I'll put my email address in, and you can drop me a line. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got a few questions in chat. Anyway, Al, do you want to read them out just so we vary from my voice?
Absolutely. Okay, so first we've got a question from, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Myri Ledgerwood, who wants to know, at which point in your career did you get an agent?
Mary, yes, I know Mary. Hello, Mary. I got an agent quite early on. So it was probably, I'm just having a quick look on here, maybe about 2008, 2009. I did the Old Vic New Voices 24-hour plays, which again I'm not sure if is still happening, but you would apply, you would have to go and audition, and then you would write a play in overnight, and it would be performed, rehearsed during the day and performed the next night. They used to do them at the Old Vic. And I did that, and an agent came to see that and got in touch with me and asked me if I would be interested in being represented. It was Alan Brody representation. I was with them for a really long time, 10 years maybe less. I'm not with them anymore. And maybe a year or so ago, we went our separate ways. I don't have an agent at the moment. I represent myself, and actually it's fine. I think if you're working in telly or film, you really do need an agent. In theatre, and you know, my agent very rarely got me any theatre work, because really you get theatre work by going out and making those relationships and knocking on those doors. An agent will sort out the contracts and the money, but in terms of like generating work and getting work for you, for theatre, that's not really how it works. And it also means that I can be in much more control of what I'm doing. I know what's going on. I know subsequently from people that I've spoken to that my agents were not very good at getting back to people. I was you know, Hannah's told me that. I know I was probably missing out on stuff rather than getting it. Whereas when I'm doing it myself, I know that I'm in control of what's happening. I know what's going on. Yeah, there might be things that I'm missing out on, but overall, I don't feel like I am. And I think, you know, I've made enough contacts this far to hopefully, you know, be able to keep generating my own work. If an agent approaches me and asks me if, you know, if I'd be interested in being represented, then it's something I would consider again with an agency, but it's not the be all and end all. So yeah, I can see the questions, Al, if you want me to just look at them.
No, I'll read them.
Okay.
Got to buy his presents.
Next up, Emma Dawson wants to know, how widespread do you think this silly viewpoint is that northern characters have to do northern specific things? She's not exactly surprised, but it seems so ludicrous.
I think it is quite widespread, unfortunately. I think there's a real just a real stereotype that still prevails, that, you know, you would really hope had gone away, but I don't think it does, and I think it keeps being perpetuated. You know, people keep saying it in TV and film and stage, and, you know, is it not like they'll put someone on, an announcer on the telly who's got a regional accent, and they get complaints? I mean, because they're not speaking properly. It's madness, and I think that's why we need to have those voices widespread. We need to get the voices out there telling stories with, you know, intelligent, funny, complex characters that aren't really broad brushstrokes and that aren't idiots, or, you know, the butt of a joke or whatever it is. And, you know, if we can do that, then every little helps, I would hope.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Last question then from Ginny Manning. What is your advice about ensuring we embrace diversity in our writing of characters?
That's really difficult. Well, it's a difficult question for me to answer, I think, and it's a really timely question for now. That's something that I don't even know if I've got an answer for it, to be honest. I'd never specify the ethnicity of a character. I never have, and I always thought I was doing like the right thing by that it was keeping it open and broad, and, you know, casting could consider, you know, anyone who is in the age category or whatever, but I've come to realize and be told that in order for it to help, it needs to be specified. You know, you can't just assume that people are gonna cast the net wide. It needs to be specified, and that's something that I'm really kind of, in the new scripts that I write, like really thinking about and really trying to like actively acknowledge and think about, because it's not, you know, quiz night, there was 2 non-white actors in quiz night, but in my writing I tend not to have a hugely diverse casting. I write for a lot of women. I always have women at the heart of my stories, but they tend to be white women. So that's something that I actively need to consider and think about. So I don't really have any advice about that other than just being aware of it, I think. And
it's interesting. I think it comes back to that conversation, the point we were having about who has the right to tell what stories, and what our notions of diversity are as well. You know, like it's a diversity of lived experience, and actually it's about it's one of those, we've been batting it around the industry in various forms for, you know, however many years, and actually I think it's only now that people are starting to do a little bit of joined up thinking and going, do you know what, we've got to, in all ways, have diverse artists creating work, have people telling stories that represent the breadth of experience in our society, and have performers on our stages and backstage creating those stories. And it's really, you know, it's really hard to see the world through someone else's eyes as well, you know. And like you say, Alison, like you don't, in all the scripts of yours that I've read, you specify very little about any of the characteristics of your characters, and the things that you need to know are contained within the script and within the story. But if you've got, you know, a white director, and if you've got a, you know, straight, cisgendered, middle-class, able-bodied, white director, and all of the team have come from that experience, then they're just going to see themselves in the play, because that's what you see. And actually, it's that we've got to work really hard to go, actually, how about I just see all the actors who want to audition. Let's look at their CVs and go, they look really interesting. Let's just see, what does that do? And actually, you know, casting a black actor and a white actor as brother and sister in Last Quiz Night, we cast the best 2 actors for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And not, you know, we didn't have any comments about people going, but what, you know, no, they had a great chemistry, they were great actors, they were delightful company members, and, you know, were the people that we wanted to work with most of all. But it's not just about race, is it? It's about diversity of experience.
No, I think it's, like I say, it's just about acknowledging it and trying to actively acknowledge it, rather than just assuming that, you know, something will happen. Like, well, you have to be part of that rather than just sitting back and going, oh well, someone else will sort that out.
But excellent question, Ginny. Thank you. We've probably got time for like one more question if anyone's got anything burning away, however practical or existential. Let us know. Otherwise, I will. Everyone can get on with their afternoons.
Oh, I'm so busy.
Just chocker. Fab. Well, thank you everybody so much for spending your Wednesday afternoon with us, and thank you very much, Alison, for having a chat.